All right, we're going to see if that has corrected the issue. Yes, oh dear Lord, we are live. I apologize for the confusion. My hope is that you guys are getting sound. Yep, we got the sound. All right, perfect. There was some confusion, and once again, the stream went to the wrong place. We'll sort all that out later. Welcome to Overtime. I do want to clarify one thing before we start. I would like to thank Sinister Porpoise. I read what you posted in the Discord, and I wanted to say thank you for that concern. I appreciate it. I am not missing this. But it is really nice when someone has your back, so thank you. I do apologize. Like I said, the stream went to the wrong place, so the show had started. But once again, as YouTube is wont to do, the stream went somewhere we don't know. My hope is it was not only vids, but if it was, well, wouldn't be the first time. This is extraordinarily difficult, actually, for any number of reasons that we are going to get into. But to start, Kabul, the capital city of Afghanistan, has fallen. The U.S. Embassy is gone. The Afghani government is gone. Last vestiges gone. We have now seen what appears to be the conclusion of a 2 decades attempt to try to free Afghanistan from one of the most brutal and oppressive regimes on the planet. The combined editorial board of the New York Times wrote, quote, "This is tragic because the American dream of being the indispensable nation in shaping the world, where the values of civil rights, women's empowerment, and religious tolerance proved to be just that, a dream." Roughly 3 weeks ago, and what Biden officials now admit was a miscalculation, the U.S. completely withdrew Afghani troops, or I should say, actually completed the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, and without U.S. support, the Taliban was able to re-engage Afghan security forces and take a number of key cities quite rapidly, including Jalalabad, which fell earlier, I believe actually it was today. But the administration also admits that this was inevitable. Without U.S. support, the Afghani government was going to fall. They apparently seem to think it was just going to take at least several months. President Ghani has fled the country. The Afghanistan's acting defense minister has slammed their president, saying that, quote, "they," his administration, "tied our hands behind our backs and sold the homeland. Damn the rich man and his gang." The U.S. Embassy had planned to evacuate over a 72-hour period, but shortly after those plans, and I mean hours after those plans were codified and starting to be put into an action, they began a crash evacuation and evacuated as rapidly as possible. Just several hours later, the U.S. flag was taken down and the embassy was lost. The presidential palace in Kabul was evacuated earlier today, and just several hours later, three remaining government officials, all that remained of the Afghan government, surrendered the palace to the Taliban. Countries across the world have now instructed their citizens to leave Afghanistan immediately. However, there are reports that there is firing at the airport and that the airport itself is taking fire in what appears to be an attempt to grab it. The U.S. has thus instructed citizens there to shelter in place and to not attempt to leave the country. The U.S. is now deploying additional troops. Yes, the U.S. is deploying troops to Afghanistan. The goal is to secure the airport We are deploying, shoot, I don't have the numbers handy. Well, first I heard was an initial 1,000 and then possibly as much as 6,000 troops immediately to attempt to secure the airport and attempt to help Americans evacuate the country. What does this mean? Well, first thing it means is the Taliban is now back in power. That has a number of implications. I'm going to get into a few details on a few of them. But to the United States, at a minimum, the Taliban has no problems with terrorism. They don't necessarily even see it as terrorism. Important note, there is a misconception about radical Islam that martyrs are people who die furthering the religion. That is true. But the misconception is that you have to be the one who is doing the act. Innocent victims also go to heaven. If you are killed by someone who is in the process of jihad, then so long as you are innocent, you go to heaven. This is why killing civilians is not a particular problem to terrorists of this nature. They're going to heaven. It's not their fault. They're going to a better place. Any suffering during their dying is going to be really inconsequential, and they will have been martyred just like you. If they're not innocent, well, they deserve to die anyway. And by that belief, well, you can knock 2 towers in New York to the ground. It's not that hard. Because of this, terrorism doesn't even really exist in the Taliban view. So while I say they have no problem sheltering terrorism, they don't believe they've ever sheltered terrorists. The semantics aside, it was the existence of the Taliban and their sheltering of Osama bin Laden that allowed him to engage in multiple attacks against the United States, most of which were either catastrophic failures or happened to maybe do a little damage up until 9/11. General consensus thus far is that this will be a return to that time and that we will have to drastically increase counterterrorism funding as a result of the Taliban now being back in power. Now, that's just the United States. What about the citizens of Afghanistan? Well, half of them are now slaves. That's simple. Half are now slaves. I'd like to show you a photo. Now, I will hold on a second. I had this photo queued up, but of course, because I'm the one who's producing, nobody knows if the photo's there or not. I'd like to show you, let's see, you know what? I'm going to put the whole screen up. There you go. That is a photo. It's a lake. Those are women going, actually, I think one is working. No, those were working women down there, women going to school. And all of them without any men nearby, oddly enough. Very few people can identify this photo. All of them look American by how they dress. And if I told you this was taken in the 1960s, you would indeed think they are American, because these are clothes that any American at the time would have worn. This is all in Kabul, Afghanistan, in the 60s. This is what it looked like before the Taliban came over. Now, Americans who are not particularly fluent in history think that the Taliban was always, or the rule of the Taliban, the way it is today, is the way it's always been, because, hey, it's a Muslim country. It couldn't ever have been any other way. It was one of the most liberal countries in the Middle East. This is what we're looking at now. On the left, 2010, after the Taliban took over. Women can't leave unless they're escorted by men or without men's permission. There is no such thing as rape. It's impossible, really. They have sort of similar terms in which the victim of rape under certain circumstances would have to marry the man who raped her. But that is, to them, it's still, rape does not exist. So 2010 on the left, women cannot get an education. In fact, it's illegal to attempt to educate them. They cannot drive. They cannot go out without their husbands. Those are the two Afghanistans. In addition, numerous relics, 3,000 years old, that the Taliban failed to complete destroying, will be destroyed. That is where we stand. Now, why am I so flustered over this? Because we saw this coming. We saw this coming. We've seen this coming for 20 years. I remember when there was the vote to authorize going to Afghanistan. And I remember immediately we wanted to give up Afghanistan and go to Iraq. Why Iraq? They didn't attack us. Nobody from Iraq attacked us. I had nothing. Well, Saddam Hussein's a bad person. Never mind, was at the time, again, one of the most liberal people in liberal leaders in the country. No, we got to attack him. He gassed 10,000 of his people, after all. Well, if that was an issue, why weren't we stopping mass genocide in Darfur? It's some of the most hypocritical arguments you can imagine. But we have to go after Saddam Hussein because reasons. Meanwhile, people are saying, well, if you don't finish in Afghanistan first, it's going to descend and become this again. And for those of you who don't realize the history, Osama bin Laden was first funded and supported, given his weapons, by a country called the United States of America, because at the time he was opposed to Russians. And after he got the Russians out of Afghanistan, there was a silly little notion in this country that maybe we should start building schools, start doing things to help the country sustain and support itself. We had promised to do that. That was the deal. They would get rid of the Soviets, they would hand the Soviets their defeat, and we would help them build better lives for themselves, because presumably that's what America does. We left, and it descended into the hell that I just showed you. We came back, said, help us, we will help you build a country, build a government, and recover from the Taliban that we helped put into power. As soon as we had a credible, didn't have to be real, just a credible presence and success in Afghanistan, went on to Iraq and other countries that had nothing to do with 9/11. And the people shouting, let's try to save these people and do what we said we'd do, are the un-American ones. The ones who hate this country, the ones who want to give therapy to the terrorists. No, I just think we should finish the jobs we say we're going to do. So, all that aside, where do we stand? The United States is, in fact, redeploying troops to Afghanistan. It's a temporary redeployment, just enough, presumably, to prevent the airport from being captured. We do not know, in fact, whether it has been captured or not. We know there's fighting there, and what appears to be an actual attack on the airport, we don't know. The cost of what has now been by far the longest war in U.S. history, and by every metric that I'm aware of, a complete failure, has been roughly as follows. Nearly 4,000 U.S. contractors have lost their lives, 3,000 U.S. soldiers, as many as 66,000 Afghani soldiers and police, and 48,000 civilians. It has cost the United States $2 trillion American dollars. Healthcare costs for the disabled and deceased veterans of these wars, Iraq and Afghanistan, is expected to exceed another $2 trillion. Congress authorized the U.S. to go into Afghanistan on September 18th, 2001. We've had absolutely zero people in the U.S. Senate or House of Representatives vote to declare war in Afghanistan. In Vietnam, the Senate Appropriations Defense Subcommittee addressed the costs of the war 42 times. In the Afghani war, the Subcommittee on Defense Spending has addressed the cost only 5 times. And during the midsummer, when nobody is voting, only one member of the subcommittee has ever discussed the cost of these wars in the 20 years since they started. Truman raised the top tax rate by 92% to pay for the Korean War. Johnson raised it 77% to pay for Vietnam. Bush cut the tax rate by 8% to pay for the Afghan and Iraq war. And the interest on these wars alone, just the interest, is expected to reach over $6.5 trillion in the next 30 years. I'm not here to depress anybody, and I'm not here to excuse me. I'm not here to this has been the longest war in U.S. history, and it is a failure by every metric we have. And it was preventable. It was our own egos that caused this, and it has been our egos that has usually gotten us into most trouble. Anyone who studied history saw this coming. Anyone who knew what was going on, what had happened with the Taliban up until then. So, as one of the people who predicted this day 20 years ago, this is not an easy thing to do. I wish I had been wrong. I'm going to go into live chat now and try not to be even further depressing. Like I said, I do apologize. I'm a little scatterbrained at the moment. There we go. And some elements of the interface there. What can I say? This is not, probably not my, you're not seeing me at my best right now, but I do appreciate you all joining us. We have a Discord. There'll be discussions of this in the Discord. I will be in the Discord to discuss it briefly, probably not on VC. I'll be typing away, but I will take a minute to... Oh, there. Okay, of course I can't. So I don't have access to the live chat right now. We had a technical issue at the beginning. It caused the streams to go to the wrong place. And I have 2 streams. Somebody once told me never cross the streams. Kind of violated that one. So here we go. So I'm going to try to get... There we go. I now have it. So to go into some of the... and like I said, I know I... rambled there a bit. I've never been known to do that. I'm really still somewhat under the weather, but this was, I was not going to miss this. When I listed the number of people who have died, when I listed how much money it cost, when I listed the cost culturally, and to the women who are going to go back to slavery, I did that because all of that was for nothing. That's not negotiable. That's not an opinion. If everything's back to where it was 20 years ago, if someone can tell me what we've accomplished, I'd genuinely like to know. I'd rather that we have accomplished something. So, yeah, there was a... Sorry, it took a little while for the... everything to catch up. I've learned, it's odd, I'm not usually, I learned, and did realize that I should check and make sure the stream was in the right place before I went on for too long, and I'm glad I did that, because it wasn't, but it took me a little while to get that figured out. Hello, Sinister, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you also, Casey, Randy, Christina, Titan, Doorknob Head, the usuals, the Blazing Wizard Hope. Thank you, too, for joining us. I am catching up. Catching up. Patrick, Patrick, I'd like to actually try to get you on because you would be far better at explaining all of this than I. And if I had had a little more energy, I probably would have reached out to you. But we will have you on at some point if you'd be willing. I think the audience could benefit from your insight. Honestly, I don't know whether we learned anything from Vietnam or not, or from the first Afghanistan. I think some of us learned something because there were people who were shouting, "Hey, the emperor has no clothes" for quite some time. Being one of them myself. And maybe this is my exercise in ego. I don't want to be the guy who sits there and says, "I told you so." And "I told you so" has only pissed people off. It's a terrible thing to say. Piece of advice to everybody in the future: never say "I told you so," because if you did tell them so, they remember. Telling them only rubs in their face, and then they want to get you back. Having said that, we didn't need to go through this. Not to just end up right where we are today. And I'm sad because I'm also in a country that doesn't need to go through what it's going through with COVID anymore. And the answer, as far as I can tell, as much as anything, is anti-intellectualism. Now, there are other things. I don't want to just blame that, but this idea that I had it better in my head a while. I think I'll move on. We had weapons of mass destruction. There's so many things. Here's the thing, and I'm curious to see, because Patrick is, in fact, in the live. I'm curious to see if he's going to realize where I'm going with this, because there is something I often say about Iraq, and people offer pushback unless they understand reality, unless they understand the history. Iraq did have weapons of mass destruction. They absolutely had weapons of mass destruction when we invaded. They had them. Now, it's not that they had them and moved them, like a lot of people. Even George W. Bush, the CIA came out and said, "Oh, our bad, they didn't have them." That's actually not true. They did have them. They did have them. Facilities like Al-Qaqa, Mustafa, had weapons of mass destruction, mustard gas, explosives. What was it? The HX explosive. Just serious stuff, Sarin. Right there. The reason we don't normally think of it as weapons of mass destruction is because it was actually all under UN seal. Now, in May 15th of, I want to say 92, Iraq declared legally all its weapons of mass destruction and surrendered them to the UN. Now, the UN didn't have the ability to destroy them, didn't want to take them out of the country, so they put them under UN seal. Now, what UN seal means, for those of you who don't know, is you seal a door, you take a plastic ring, put it right around the handle so that nobody can open the door, and then you take a little tape and run it right down the door, and boom, weapons of mass destruction are now sealed. So that's how the UN seals weapons of mass destruction. If you're lucky, they'll put a guard out in front. I think there were 6 WMD sites in Iraq, but we don't consider them WMD sites because they were actually legal. They were there, they were declared, and the UN was aware and had a full accounting of what they were. When the US invaded, the UN said, "We aren't sticking around for a war," and gave the locations and contents of all of these sites to the Americans and said, "We're leaving." The US actually stayed at Mutatha overnight. The UN, the UN soldier was there, said, "I am leaving. This is now your responsibility. You've invaded this country," and they left. If we're there for weapons of mass destruction because they're so dangerous, why didn't we secure the ones we knew about? The high explosive HTX that was looted from these sites, we didn't secure them for we started securing them about 2 months into it, if I recall. Didn't finish until 6 months into it. By the time we had, they were all looted. Most of the nerve agents were probably useless. We don't know for certain. Nobody's used them since, so we're probably okay with that. But the high explosives weren't. What do you think comprised most of the IEDs that they used against us? So I take a look at that and I say, well, when Bush says we're there for weapons of mass destruction and to make the world a safer place, I got to tell you, I don't buy it. So, and yes, Porpoise says, we're the ones who gave them to them anyway. it's this arrogance that we can show up in any country, take it over and do whatever we want. And how many times is this going to get us into trouble? You know why the Ayatollah is in Iran? Because we overthrew the democratically elected government to install our own government. How'd that work out? I'd like to think we are the greatest country in the world. I think we could be if we really wanted to be, but we're so busy telling everybody how great we are. We're not actually doing it, are we? I like what the New York Times said, because when you talk about human rights, the entire planet just took a step back. But we care. That's why we went into Iraq. He gassed 10,000 of his own people, came out of that. Carl, thank you for joining us. It's good to see you as always. Dave also, and I think I do think I've got a couple of. I see a number of people agreeing with Titan, and I really would like to try to get that to stop. I'm not sure. It feels like it's a conspiracy. We were there for WMDs. It's called oil. Well, okay, yeah. And look, you know what? We have a lot to be proud of in this country. We really have a lot. I don't want to let's shit on America. We have a shit ton to be proud of in this country. We do. But we make serious mistakes. We add slavery. We committed genocide several times. Let's someday decide if we're going to go into a country, we'll actually help the people and not bail as soon as they've given us everything we wanted. It's kind of a shit thing to do. All right, let me check. I have one message incoming here. All right, I want to double check this. I want to read this. Thank you, Titan. Let me read this. Oh, dear Lord, don't get old, ladies and gentlemen. Like you need breaking news for that. Might as well do a rundown for those of you who are just joining us. The country of Afghan has fallen to the Taliban. The Taliban has seized the presidential palace. The U.S. embassy is now gone. Everyone has fled. The president has fled. There is absolutely no hope that the military can recover it. The military has been completely overrun. Every key city has now been overrun. There is no government. The last 3 remaining members of the government surrendered it to the Taliban earlier today. It looks like actually probably about 6 hours ago. The Taliban, who harbored Osama bin Laden, are now back in power. I think I would, if I could, fly George W. Bush's mission accomplished banner. But of course, we all know that was an accident. So I have this. Statement by Donald J. Trump, 45th President of the United States of America. I wish Joe Biden wouldn't use September 11th as the date to withdraw troops from Afghanistan for 2 reasons. First, we can and should get out earlier. 19 years is enough. In fact, far too much and way too long. He's right. I agree. But I think we agree for very different reasons. I made an early withdrawal possible by already pulling out much of our billions of dollars of equipment out, and more importantly, reducing the military presence to less than 2,000 troops from the 16,000 level that was there. Likewise, in Iraq, and 0 troops in Syria, except for the because I'm not going to get started on Syria. Secondly, September 11th represents a very sad event and period for our country and should remain a day of reflection. Oh, really? And remembrance, honoring those great souls that we lost. Getting out of Afghanistan is a wonderful and positive thing to do. I plan to withdraw on May 1st, and we should keep as close to that schedule as possible. How do you honor someone? I think that's a fair question. How do you honor someone? A lot of ways to do it, but let me make a radical suggestion that the start isn't by throwing away their lives. How many people, how many U.S. troops have died because they believed it was important? because they were told it was important? Was it important? Because I don't think we were there to build swimming pools. Do you guys remember? I didn't have time to collect these, but that huge Olympic-sized swimming pool in the military base in Afghanistan. I think it was, I'm pretty sure that was the Afghanistan. They may have built one in Iraq. No, it was Afghanistan. It was the first one where they did that. We're not going to build schools. We're not going to try to actually secure them. We're going to build a swimming pool. And the people in the gold, I don't know. I'm sorry. Apologies. I'm ranting again. Point being, all we had to do was take it seriously. And nobody can tell me we did. We didn't. We wanted to hit Saddam Hussein. This is a good excuse. We threw away American lives in Afghanistan, destroyed the country, so we could go off and do other things. And if anybody disagrees with me, name the channel, time and place, and I will debate you on that topic. I'm right. If you call that honoring people, if you call that honoring the people who died on September 11th, okay. You do you. You're wrong. That's simple. Thank you for that. All right, so just to try to wrap this up, I will do, well, yeah, I think I saw 4 DoD civilians and then over 3,000 dead contractors for the super chat. And by the way, I wanted to say that earlier to Jake, $2 from Jake. We're so busy saying we're great, we forgot to be. Oh, I like that one. I like that one. I've used the R word. I find it interesting. I'm aware plenty of channels, they won't use that word on YouTube, and there's a reason. You get demonetized instantly for using that word. That's fine. They're not news channels. Don't want to use that word. I don't blame anybody. This is a news channel. We get demonetized. So, Jake, you've always been a big supporter. And by the way, I hadn't realized, I knew things were going on in Afghanistan. I knew it was going to fall. I thought we had a couple of weeks. Excuse me. Thank you for that. I'm using the wrong mic. All right. Yeah. Well, we were there for the biggie. I think there were 2 biggies in Iraq. I think the reason we went into Iraq was one, Bush Jr. was upset because he thought that Hussein had tried to kill his father, which wasn't true. That was a story. Intelligence had said that, but that was a story that was fed to us by the Kuwaitis so that we'd support them. It was a lie. It didn't happen. I think he was also desperate to prove that he was better than his father, because his father failed to do it. His father didn't really try. He stopped. And then lastly, for OPEC veto power, on the assumption that the Royal House of Saud is going to get overthrown. If the Royal House of Saud is overthrown, we lose the one vote that provides OPEC veto power, which is the the biggest reason we had the economic boom of the 90s. If you want to credit Clinton, fine. Clinton had something to do with it. Not a lot. It came from the Bush deal negotiated before Clinton, exchanging weapons for a lot of money, and a sweet deal on OPEC, giving us the cheapest rates of oil of just about any other country in the world, certainly any so-called first world industrialized country, certainly all the European countries. And that's how we had the economic boom of the 90s. Bush wanted to ensure it. So, all right. Once again, I do apologize. I thought I was a little more cogent than I actually am. I'll be looking back on this saying, who's that idiot, and why did someone put a camera in front of him? So what I want to do is, breaking news, don't grow old. What I'm going to do is do just one more rundown of the news. And barring any questions, I think we will be having Pat on to discuss some of this. I'm not going to be in the VC in the Discord, but I'll be in the lobby in a few minutes. I'm going to need a little time to shut everything down here. So what do we know? We know that as of today, the Afghani government no longer exists. All of the major cities and key cities and points of power in Kabul have fallen to the Taliban. The excuse me. The embassy has been evacuated and no longer exists. The flag is down. We have no diplomatic presence in Afghanistan anymore. We officially have no military presence in Afghanistan anymore. The presidential palace was ceded to the Taliban by the last 3 remaining members of the Afghani government. The president has fled. It's over. So that is 20 years and a tremendous amount of money, over $4 trillion by the time we're done. And we are right back where we started. There are worse things, I suppose, but that's a bitter pill. At any rate, thank you all for joining us. I do apologize for the questions. I don't think to apologize for the questions. It's not. At any rate, I'm going to move forward. Yeah. Apologies. As I said, I'm a little distracted. Thank you all for your support. And yeah, there'll be people in the Discord. Anybody wants to join us. And we will try to have on Patrick to discuss it. We'll, I'm sure, be mentioning it on Overtime the Rundown, which will be on Wednesday. And on Tuesday, we are trying to get Marianne back for her second part on Christian atheism. So I'm hoping we can do that. Thank you all for joining us, and have a good evening.
Microphone muted.